Hello everyone, how are you all doing? And hello to everyone back there. Okay, so FinTech for Net Zero, powering Wales's green future. We'll be running this session until 4 o'clock. Welcome back to the Ignite stage. As the race to net zero accelerates, FinTech is playing a vital role in reshaping how individuals, businesses and communities engage with sustainability. This panel, FinTech for Net Zero, powering Wales's green future, brings together three pioneering Welsh companies leading the charge at the intersection of financial innovation and environmental impact. Chairing this discussion is Sarah Jones, CEO of FinTech Wales, bringing over 20 years of award-winning marketing experience across a wide range of sectors, including finance, tech, legal, HR, healthcare, and education. Sarah is known for her strategic vision. Is that true? I hope so. Over to you, Sarah, and the panelists, and I hope you all enjoy. Thank you.
Site viewers. There we go. So as you know, I'm Sarah Jones, CEO at FinTech Wales. So if we could all introduce yourself and give us a little overview of what your company does, that'll kick us off and we'll start some questions.
Good afternoon everyone. My name is Jarrad Morris. I'm the founder and CEO of Plug Charging and FleetEV. So Plug Charging and FleetEV, we're the biggest provider of electric vehicles to the public sector in Wales, and we provide end-to-end EV and decarbonisation solutions.
Thank you. Hi, Richard. Theo, CEO, co-founder of Zero FinTech, a new bank founded and built in Wales for the generation who are concerned about climate change. The little known fact is that the big traditional banks use your money that's in your current accounts and savings accounts to lend to other people to make money for themselves, and they still actively, many of them, invest in the fossil fuel industry. We've tried to build a bank from the ground up which has a fundamental promise that no money that ever goes through us will ever be used to do anything that harms the planet. And we're trying to build that as a product that appeals to the young generation, particularly the young people in Britain today are really quite worried about climate change, as they should be.
Hello, I'm Matt Thomson, co-founder of Gopher Zero. We help small, medium-sized businesses with practical, bankable and affordable carbon reduction planning.
Lovely, welcome. Thank you all for joining me this afternoon. So, FinTech and net zero. So why, a question to you all really, why is FinTech important in the plan for net zero, and how can we speed up that process?
Shall I start?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Lots of ways that FinTech's important in that. Oh, hang on. I don't think anyone at the back's allowed feedback coming through. Well, I'll try and carry on irrespective. It's slowly going away. The thing about net zero and climate change is that when you get involved in this industry, and in FinTech in particular, is just the realization of just how much information you need to master to get on top of the problem. You've got to, when you look at a business and you say, well, how do we make this business net zero? You've got to look at all the three scopes, but the detail of that is all of your operation, all the services you buy, all the suppliers you have, each of them and where they procure all the services, and you've got to look at that whole supply chain and try and keep that down to the lowest impact on the planet that you can. And that's ignoring, in our case, what you then go on and do with the money as a neobank that sits in people's current accounts and savings accounts. And so FinTech, I guess in summary, what is FinTech? Well, FinTech is the use of technology to make things efficient and work smoothly, and that's why FinTech has such an important role to play in surfacing the data that people need to be able to make those decisions and automate the processes of minimizing impact, really. Of course, in our case, we're taking that one stage further because the actual business itself fundamentally is a product for consumers that is intended to help them on their journey to reduce their impact, improve their sustainability, and learn and understand what it is about their lives that is impactful, and if they so choose, to look at ways to reduce that impact. So in our case, we have a feature in our product called the Green Score, which we've invested quite a lot of time and money, data science and a bit of AI to build, which examines all of your bank transactions, so where you spend your money, and calculates roughly, by looking at all that transaction data, what your footprint is, what your impact is. So if I were Elon Musk with a super yacht flying around the world in a private jet, my green score would hopefully be 0. If I'm Greta Thunberg, maybe my green score would be 900 and something, because she goes nowhere by car. She goes by on the train everywhere, and she lives a very, very sustainable life. This isn't meant to be preachy. It's meant to just be informative, to allow people who want to know about that to find out.
But that leads me on actually to my next question for you is, so what gap did you see in how people understand their climate impact that led you to build Zero Bank?
Sure. Do you want to let the other guys, do you want to let them deal with the first question first? I don't want to.
Do you want to add to why FinTech is going to have...
So I think for us, we're in quite a unique position because our customers are consumers, businesses, public sector. We're also dealing with investors and debt on the other side of the business as well. So on the fleet side of the business, FinTech underpins everything we do. So on salary sacrifice for businesses, but then obviously consumers having access to salary sacrifice schemes via their employers. And then we've got that on the public sector side of things. We've got the FinTech tools we're using. So same as Richard, a lot of the data analysis tools we use. So we just built something called EV, which is electric vehicle intelligence engine. So the main purpose of that is basically to do total cost ownership calculations for public sector organisations, making that switch to EV, and then basically making that so justifiable for them and auditable, so when they do actually make that change, they can make it in such a way they can say, this is why I've done it and this is the saving we've made. On the flip side of it then, on the charging side of the business, if we're looking at a charging scheme, sometimes we'll take a risk on that where we fund it and we're getting our money back over the next 10, 15 years potentially on that scheme. Traditionally, that's been a pretty hefty spreadsheet that we've used for that. We've now built a tool which is effectively modelling that out to put in different scenarios into that. We can use that then to decide what we're going to invest in, where we're going to use our own money, whether we're going to raise on that, whether it's going to be debt, what it's going to look like. So every single part of our business is underpinned by FinTech. I think a lot of people think of car sales and all of that stuff, I think is very, very one-dimensional. But I think everything we do now, especially with EV, has to be justifiable. And I think we're using the tools that I've just mentioned there to do that as much as possible.
Yeah. And Matt?
Just at a very sort of conceptual level, FinTech helps to explain the risk-reward. And as we transition to a different energy landscape, net zero, we're going to have to invest quite a lot of money to get there. These technologies are very different to the existing technologies. They have high upfront capital cost and low operating costs, so it's a different mindset. So FinTech is really important to communicate that risk-reward, what it means for the consumer and the business.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So yeah, Richard, over to you. So what gap did you see in how people understand their climate impact to make you think, right, I need to do something and I need to build this?
Yeah, there's a danger this is going to stray into a political speech. But we live in a world today where money can buy political opinion and bias. You know, we see it in the US now at a level that we never imagined was possible. And you know, when you look at who are the campaign donors for all of the major politicians in the world, they can buy influence. And net zero is sort of, and the fossil fuel industry is a sort of case in point. You know, the fact is that they are sort of lobbying politicians to sustain the use of fossil fuels because that's where they make a ton of money. The reality is that the world is warming terrifyingly quickly, and the threat that creates to all of us is just off the scale. And I literally, what made me set up Zero is I can't believe how little the world is doing about this huge problem. And even if you don't necessarily believe that the science is precisely right and that, you know, when we get to 4 degrees of warming, 2 billion people are displaced and can't eat and stuff, is it a risk we need to take? It's just simply not a risk that we need to take, because we can, without, you know, putting a lot of cost into things, mitigate the risk by moving faster to net zero. It's an opportunity, it's not a cost. And you know, you see some of this kind of political influence manifesting in the news the other day, where we heard that the energy price cap in the UK has gone up, so your energy bills are going to go up. And somehow the media narrative around that was that it was the fault of net zero. It's net zero's fault. And somebody said it's because we've now got to build more, the government need to invest in the national grid. And the government is using your money to subsidise green energy production. This is nonsense. Actually, all the data shows that green energy production reduces the cost of energy. The reason our bills are high in the UK is largely driven by the Dutch gas wholesale price, really not driving a large proportion of what we produce as energy in the UK. So anyway, that's what drove me when we were contemplating what to do next 4 years ago, to bring this to life in a banking app and provide a product that for those who believe in this narrative and get it and worry about it. And the data is that the under 35-year-olds are 75% are actually worried about it. Most of us in the room at our age, maybe we're less worried about it. Then we have a sort of solution which allows people to make a banking choice that aligns to that worry. And we believe that we hope we can build a digital bank that appeals above all other banks to that young generation who have that concern.
Fab, thank you. And we do love a political debate, so I'm sure we'll come back to that. So Jarrad, obviously with FleetEV, what barriers do SMEs face in their journey to electric fleets, and how can you remove them for them?
I think if we're having this conversation on Thursday after the budget, it'd probably be a lot more barriers. But the reason I started FleetEV back in 2021 was I wanted to take a consultative approach to helping people make that switch to electric vehicles. I think when you make the choice to go EV, there's all of a sudden this absolute cascade of decisions you have to make. What vehicle you're going to have, how you're going to finance it, how you're going to insure it, how you're going to charge it. All of those things are a challenge. So the aim of FleetEV was to basically try and simplify that process. The aim was to keep it very small, and it's now growing arms and legs and scaled at a pace we can have a dream of. But with the big thing for us was simplifying that process and giving people the data insights to make that switch. So they didn't make it and had a situation with, well, actually, that's not for me. Because the worst thing in this industry is bad news. I think we always see that. As soon as something goes wrong, someone is saying something about that, whether that's on Facebook or even LinkedIn. Cars catch fire, everyone assumes it's an EV. Very rarely it is. I think trying to get ahead of that bad news where we can and try and give as much of that data up front for us is key. Because if someone has a bad experience, they shout about it. It might put off the next people making that switch. So, yeah, simplicity has been a big thing for us, but the biggest barrier is infrastructure again. We're seeing that a lot at the moment, particularly in Wales. The way in which the grid's been upgraded and some of that is not progressing in the way it should. It's still meant for a petrol industry. They're looking at things which progress at a pace which don't progress the pace they need to. Planning and regulations not going as quickly as it should as well. So there's lots of barriers involved in it, lots of bureaucracy involved in it that we try and get around, but it's an ongoing challenge. And as I said, things like cost per mile coming in potentially tomorrow in the budget. We deal with fleets that have 7-year total cost of ownership calculations where all of a sudden they're 2 years into that journey, and if they've now got cost per miles to take into account, those models are changing. If they make any amends to the salary sacrifice schemes, hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of vehicles which have gone into fleets in the last 5-6 years on the policy promises will be impacted. So infrastructure is the biggest challenge, closely followed by curveballs from a political point of view as well.
I think we're all holding on to our seats for tomorrow, aren't we? Just goodness me. So Matt, similar question really for you with your business. So businesses don't often know where to start with, their emissions reductions. So, what's that first conversation you have with them and how do you make them feel better about it?
I would actually disagree. I think it's really easy to start because you can Google, how do I get rid of my carbon reductions? And your AI agent will come up and give you a nice long list.
AI could give you a lovely
plan. But the problem is, as Richard alluded to, is that as soon as you start digging into it, it gets more and more complicated. You've got the interplay between solar on your roof, EV charging, heat pumps, behaviour change to introduce energy efficiency measures. And they all interplay, or they can interplay. And so it can get and it's very specific to the business use case as well. So one business isn't necessarily the same as another business. And so those rules of thumb just aren't there. And so for most businesses, when they start scratching away at it, go, oh, this is too much. And so it goes down the list of priorities. And unless you've got a customer who's demanding, carbon action as part of your sort of pitch to them, it gets put to the bottom of the pile.
Right, well, thank you for that. We were in great flow then, but yeah, I think, yeah. So looking at empowering action then, a question for you all, maybe start with you, Matt, with the mic. So we know most people in organisations want to be greener, but, is behaviour a bit slower than we all want and expect right now in 2025. So, what shift decisions in the real world in your experience?
Well, like I say, solar is the cheapest form of electricity, period. But the payback is highly dependent on how much a business is used for itself. If it's exporting it all to the grid, it's going to have a payback of 15 years. Whereas if it uses it all itself for its own generation, it could be 2 years. So that is quite a massive difference. So it's trying to communicate and show the business, what their options are, what it means for them. And then it's just practical advice saying, well, look, have you thought about using all that surplus summer solar to power EVs to your employees during the summer, or get a little bit of equipment that can power your hot water with the solar. It might cost you £100, but it means that you're not exporting that solar and having to buy it back. And just getting that sort of message across in a really simple and straightforward way is what we're trying to do. And then people will make green choices. You see people you get these sort of groups of people putting solar on their roof and groups of people shifting to EVs. Once they know it does make sense, it doesn't always, and that's where the problem does arise, and that you get those sort of bad people who have bad experiences and say, it doesn't save me any money. But there are many use cases where it is cheaper, and I think that's what we've got to sell.
Are you seeing, we'll come on because I want you to answer that question too, but are you seeing, more net zero champions in businesses? Like we're seeing chief AI officers coming through.
I think the pen is starting to drop with the insurance companies.
Great.
And I think that the challenge is, though, is that, if this business goes to net zero, what does that mean on the climate? And there isn't a correlation. Mm-hmm. And so it's very hard for that insurance company to give that business a discount. But I think they are starting to reform. So you get these So I live in Monmouthshire. We've just been hit with massive flooding. In the village I'm in, there's a lot of people who can't get insurance anymore. But there's a new type of insurance, which is called a parametric type model, where it's a different way of insuring properties, and it's paid out on the severity. So if you're prepared, you can claim a certain amount regardless of what your house. So it's encouraging people to get prepared for flooding. So just putting in practical things, and I think that's where we can try, and that's the green sort of shoots that there is a sort of new model coming.
Talking their language, these people have are going through this horrible thing, and so we've got some solutions there.
Yeah. So I think it's the insurance companies are starting to sort of think, what can we do? And if they get on board, then I think the finance sector will come on board, and it will just make the whole conversation a lot easier. Yeah. But like I say, at the moment, there are use cases where it does make sense, financial sense, and it's just communicating that. Yeah.
Over to you, Richard. Do you want me to repeat the question?
No? I've got it firmly ensconced in my mind. You answer from a kind of business perspective. I guess I have to answer from the kind of consumer, the individual perspective, because that's what our business targets. And the thing about net zero climate change is the way Al Gore framed it. It's the ultimate inconvenient truth. It's truth. Pretty much everyone knows that, but it's just awfully inconvenient to us all. And so consumers tend to look at it and say, well, God, the government's not doing anything about it. Donald Trump's telling us to drill oil wells again. Why should I do? What little old me? What difference can I make? And in terms of how you then change the behaviour, well, what you have to learn about kind of the behavioural science of this subject is, and we'll all have this experience in social media, when someone posts something you don't agree with, the worst thing you can do is go and, you absolute idiot, you've got it totally wrong, because that just drives that person to entrench in their position even more. So you have to give informational nudges, factual informational nudges, that you hope over time will gradually affect their thinking, so that one day at home of an evening, whilst discussing it with their partner, whilst watching TV, they sort of wake up and say, well, I'm going to just change that little thing about my life because I get it now. And so that's what we will try and do, and that's what Green Score in our app is about, and we will build on that. The reality for consumers, though, is there are a lot of quite simple things that finance can empower people to do quite soon. So installing heat pumps in your house to replace your gas boiler. We need some government-led incentives and encouragements, or the requirement to do it, to push. It's not actually, there is a reasonable payback, and finance can empower that. So if you can get a cheap loan that pays for the cost of it, and you're net better off after 5 to 10 years, including the finance cost. That's good. So heat pumps, solar panels. I am a believer in EVs. There's lots of arguments that say EVs are not really so good because of the cost of disposing of batteries and the short lifetime. But actually, I always believe in technology. You've got to push forwards on a new front, even if the technology today isn't quite meeting the objective. You only will meet the objective if you push forward with the technology, learn the learnings, adapt, improve, and go again. And so I'm fully behind all of that. So those are the things. What we also hope to do in our app is just identify small lifestyle tweaks that people can make. So buying from a supplier that's more sustainable. If you buy your fruit and veg from a better supplier, you buy products. And we have unique insight in a bank app into your transactional life. We can see where you spend everything, where you buy everything. And so that puts us in a position where, with a bit more time and to be able to invest in evolving the technology, we hope to be able to inform people about their spending patterns and what they could do better in a friendly way, not a preachy way. Some of the early banking apps, in the way that they surfaced carbon footprint, it was bound to fail, because what they did was every transaction you see in your bank app feed, £20 at Tesco, carbon footprint, 4 kilos of carbon, and then your brain just gets overloaded. You see 50 of those. Doesn't mean anything. One's 100 kilos, one's 2 kilos. Lose interest. So we've tried to service that in the single number, the green score, which moves and tries to gamify the experience of understanding how your footprint's moving around and try and bring that to life.
And before we hand the mic over to you, Jarrad, that's interesting, so that they can see, people can see how well they're doing. Mm-hmm. So is that alone enough, or will you have to look at rewards or different prompts or things, or?
Yeah, we debate this one a lot. I'd love to be able to afford in a bank app to reward you for good green behaviour, but it's financially very, very hard to do. The little known fact about banking is it's a fabulously profitable thing. Once you get to millions of customers and tons of capital deployed, it's not a profitable thing at a small scale, at a small business. The cost of onboarding a customer for us, just the hard cost of KYC and £10 or something like that. That's ignoring the marketing cost of marketing to them and getting them on board. We make next to nothing out of what they spend, like a fraction of a percent on what they spend on their card. So you've got to get to scale. Sorry. That's a short answer for no. We can't really afford to reward. There are some.
The carbon credits.
Yeah, so we're doing that. So within our app, you can offset your carbon footprint using a thing called the Zero Carbon Projects.
To demonstrate that consumer A has dropped there,
mm-hmm.
and therefore claim that carbon credit and sell that to the finance company.
I don't like that stuff. I mean, do you know what I mean? It feels like, the idea that, oh, look, I've been a good boy, I've reduced my footprint a bit, and I'm going to sell that to someone else as an excuse they can use for the fact they're going to actually burn more gas this year. It feels sort of a slightly dirty thing.
Carbon offsetting is the bane of the...
Yeah, so we offer carbon offsets that people can buy in our app if they really want to kind of reduce their impact. But the ones we offer are proper carbon removal type schemes. So either carbon capture or remangroving the swamps of the Amazon, which is a proven way to literally extract carbon from the atmosphere. So hard removal things, not buying offsets that you've bought. That I feel, some people argue that that's a good market, but we're steering a bit clear of that because
behaviour change is really important.
Mm-hmm.
We need to try and get some incentivization to get people to shift. Health is another one, though, isn't it? You can demonstrate that greener products, which might be more expensive, are healthier in terms of the less pesticides.
As I say, we would love to be able to have the money in the system to reward. Yeah. It's not commercially viable for us today. The reward, we hope, comes through the endorphin rush of driving your green score down and feeling better about yourself. And we try to bring that to life in what we do.
I think it will come. I do think everybody's a lot more, and you walk into an audience that's that cares a lot more than us oldies. I'm sad I'm one of the oldies now. So, Jarrad, over to you before I start crying. Did you want to add anything about how, obviously, behaviour could be slow even though someone's very, very keen? And then maybe what was the tipping point, or what is the tipping point where SMEs are like, yes, okay, let's go?
I think for us over the last couple of years, I think particularly with things like salary sacrifice, we talked about this prior to the session, so used cars, bringing down the cost of EV. One of the big things from the conversations recently, Wales Climate Week a couple of weeks ago, one of the main topics was a fair and just transition. And trying to have a fair and just transition is quite difficult when some people can't afford electric vehicles. And I think salary sacrifice is a great one for that. You know, reducing the emissions of their grey fleet for people that might not necessarily be able to secure credit. You know, for any sort of reason, they might have a parking ticket. You know, we've had clients that have failed finance previously because they've had a parking ticket they didn't know about, and they failed finance because their credit score has been impacted. So having a salary sacrifice scheme where you're underwriting the business then gives more people access to switch to EV. And then with used cars as well. So, you know, used cars, we're at a point now where vehicles on lease are going back into the ecosystem to go back out on lease to consumers. And we're seeing electric vehicles going out at £140 a month, which, you know, the cost considerations and the pushbacks we've always had on cost are no longer there. So I think it's a real good opportunity for people to make that switch. And the big barrier has always been cost, but that's now not a big one for them.
That is frightening with people sort of can't get mortgages and things because of parking tickets. You know, it is, and you've just run me, I've got one to reply to. So we will be coming to the audience for questions in a minute. If you do have anything, don't be shy. So looking at scaling and partnerships, what's the biggest scaling bottleneck right now? We've got capital, regulation, consumer adoption or infrastructure, or anything else?
All of the above. Infrastructure, as I said earlier, is a big one for us, but I think regulation as well is huge. So if I use a real world example, so TROs, traffic restriction orders, so that's something you need to put an EV charger in place. If you want a TRO in Cardiff, that's a 7-month process. So that's to get an EV dedicated space for an EV charger. So without one of those, people are parking in that with, you know, diesel vehicles, petrol vehicles, is not being enforced. So you end up in a situation, you might end up putting in 50, 60 chargers, but no actual dedicated parking bays. So that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but, you know, that process needs to develop. That's still the same as it's always been. So things like that, which are the tailwinds, which are causing us nightmares day in, day out on a practical basis. And I think then the bringing along the local authorities we deal with on getting involved in the investment piece on it as well. I think there's a big push, particularly outside of Wales, for VCs get involved and funding charging infrastructure rollouts when they're over-egging it, putting 6,000 chargers into one place. That's not good for anyone because there's only so much electricity in that area. You know, they're not getting the right chargers in. They're just pushing it to get the numbers out there. So I think for us, it's trying to find that balance between picking the right opportunities and putting the charge in the right place, as opposed to taking the ego approach and putting 4,000 into 2 square miles.
To tick a box.
Basically, yeah.
I don't really have much to say on that one because our business is, you know, trying to persuade consumers to take a new banking app. So, you know, on the subject of partnerships, constraints, regulation, I mean, I can talk about, you know, probably the over-regulation of financial services in the UK. It's got a bit.
I was going to say more like growing your business has probably been.
It's a significant constraint. The regulations have become in the UK on FinTech, particularly in the consumer space, have become a constraint on competition and innovation. You know, the case in point is the authorised push payment fraud reimbursement one, which I go on about a lot, you know, which was a regulation came in last October, which requires banks to compensate people up to £85,000 if they've been scammed. That's noble and worthy. The person's been scammed, it's not their fault. But imagine me as a startup being told I've got to pay some guy 85 grand back because he fell for a scam. When I've made £3 out of him as a customer over the last year or two of life, it's impossible. Of course, the big banks can afford that because across the mix of customers that they've had for decades, it's a tiny percentage, but as a startup, it's a risk that just completely annihilates you, which is why we constructed our business, partly why we constructed it regulated outside of UK, that regulation. So sometimes these regulations have noble intent, good intent, but always regulators never think through the business consequences and cause and effect, knock-on effect of a regulation, and we've seen it time and again in financial services regulation in the UK. First, it was the Retail Distribution Review, which stopped financial advisors taking a kickback on in certain investments. Well, brilliant. It caused the financial advice market to shrink from 100,000 financial advisors to 25,000. Suddenly, lots of people in the UK have no financial advice they can get anymore. So was that a win for the society? Not really. So we've seen that quite a lot of times, really. So I think regulations need to be thought through and calmed down a lot. Obviously, with protecting consumers still firmly in mind, because without these regulations, there would be clearly, lots of disadvantaged people. But
what about you, Matt? Anything from your point of view?
Sort of continuing on the regulation theme, I think there hasn't been enough decisiveness around carbon accounting. I think it was created as a smokescreen, and it's really complicated for a business to get their head around what compliance, who they should, which board, which standard they should comply with. It's really too complicated. You need a PhD. You need a sustainability officer with a PhD to understand it and advise you. And so for most small businesses, that's just not possible. So my view is it's about helping them with practical carbon reduction schemes. Don't worry about the absolute number. What I would say, though, on the flip side, is the government created a requirement for, so the majority of our business is helping businesses get tender ready for government contracts. So one of the really good things the UK government has done is requested that any business tendering for a government contract over 5 million or part of a framework agreement has to have a carbon reduction plan, like the Modern Slavery Act policy, like a health and safety document. And so that just forces businesses to get going. So it's a stick, but it's a good stick. It's self-cert, but it's public. So most businesses, I believe, want to do the right thing, and if they publish something on a website and say this is what we're going to do, they're going to do it, and so you don't need the red tape around, auditing that business. Are they actually doing it? I think let's focus on just getting moving, getting them to put a plan out there. And so I would say the government has done a good thing on that side, but they've just created a really messy situation around carbon accounting per se.
I love that. It's a stick, but a good stick. Do you have any questions? Yeah, go for it.
So how do you, if you're looking at an area sort of like the South Wales Valleys, for example, you want to put in EVs, you want to try and encourage that in the area, but it's really difficult because all the houses are terraced housing and it's on street parking. They've not got barely enough room for a single car per household, let alone an EV driveway where someone can put an EV charger on, things like that. How are you tackling that when it comes to areas where the housing's old and there's just not enough room really to build a large charging port near someone's house where they would park their car?
I think that's got your name. Yeah, it's got your name on it, Jarrad. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's one of the big things we're involved in. So Blaen y Gwent, for example, I was in a meeting with them recently, and they described their roads as meant for horses and carts, and have never changed. And that's a problem we have on the vehicle side of things, but also the infrastructure side of things. So you have solutions out there where you have channels in pavement, which is not something we offer, where people have a charger in front of their property and you run a cable across that. But one of the things that we're looking at is lamppost chargers. So if the lampposts are front of pavement, we've got 80 of those going into Cardiff next month. You can find those via the app. There's community benefit schemes off the back of them as well. So basically trying to create them into community assets. So lamppost chargers, in curb chargers as well. So we're looking at that in some of the valley areas where the curbs are big enough, where we'd actually drop a charger into the curb. But yeah, it's a real challenge. One of the biggest problems we have with that now in Wales, and particularly in the CCR, is as of next April, the local authority transport plans are all changing how they deploy EV charging infrastructure funding. So that is all going back to the CCR, and Cardiff Capital Region will be managing that as opposed to local authorities. Well, that basically means that places that, like Blaen y Gwent, the rural areas, will be pushed to try and source private funding and private investment. Well, the utilisation isn't there for that. So we'd end up in a situation where the solutions are viable, and they're viable with some subsidy. But from a private investment point of view, utilization is not going to justify people putting any money into it. So it's a catch-22 because the solution's there, but obviously you've got to pay for it as well. But it's a real challenge in some of the narrow areas. Also looking at community charging hubs as well at the end of terrace houses. So if they've got old patches of land which the community might own, looking at putting charging to community centres and sharing those. But in reality, I'm talking myself out of a sale here, but the cheapest way to charge a vehicle is at home. If you've got solar panels and a battery, it's free. If you're using a smart tariff, it's even cheaper. It's not cheap to use my charge in the street. So it's trying to find that balance of getting the infrastructure in there. But again, there's no point putting infrastructure in for the sake of it.
Just to add to that, there is one sort of business-led sort of concept called co-charger, where if you've got your own driveway, you can share it with people and they can come and book in and you can make a bit of money on the side. So I think that's, and often you can use it as cheap parking as well. So it's worth sort of signing up because it doesn't cost anything to sign up. They're probably right. They're copying, are they? Yeah. So it's coming. There's sort of more innovative ideas.
Yeah, we've seen it. Any other questions?
Well, I just think I'd like to. Just on the subject of you could not compare the current electric car. We were talking about battery technology a little earlier on, to the current standard of the combustion engine, because it's taken many decades to get to the level of efficiency that we can see in a combustion engine these days. And I think we're at the start of the journey with electric vehicles, which in 10 to 15 years from now we'll look back on and we'll see a very different picture, where it will be battery capacities are much higher, distance and ranges are a thing of the past, for example. And I do worry a little bit that we think about the technology infrastructure for the next few years. So I don't disagree with putting lamppost chargers in and things like that. But is there a horizon beyond that where we've put an enormous amount of infrastructure in place, but the technology has overtaken it, and we're left with charging stations and the like, which are totally obsolete? I think we've got petrol stations at the moment, which are strategically located for the combustion engine world. Can we not repurpose those? Can we not be starting to think about how they can serve the needs of the future electric market better than trying to make it possible to trickle charge cars everywhere all the time? Is there anybody talking about that?
Well, I would say trickle charging is one of the best things we can do for the grid. So the grid is a real challenge. When you're shifting from a place where electricity is sort of half our energy to it being 100% of our energy, we've got to double the pipes getting the electricity around. And so trickle charging works. Those lamppost charging are brilliant because often the lampposts were put in with the old halogen light bulbs. They're now LED, and so they've got huge spare capacity. And so we actually want more and more people to be using trickle charging and charging everywhere. So it's a behaviour change problem, rather than just being the same old, right, we get in a car, we drive as far as that bladder can take us, and then we refill. It's trying to sort of change that methodology or that sort of concept. But you also need those charging stations. But, you go to Europe, and it's not a problem. It's just the UK has sort of done it in a weird way, I think.
So I think some of the infrastructures out there now is getting to the point where it is completely defunct compared to what it should be. We purchased a company recently where we acquired all their hardware as well. Some of the hardware is 5 years old, just out of warranty. The advancements in technology compared to when that was installed are huge. But also I think what we're seeing a lot of now is vehicle to grid. So all the chargers we put in are capable of having vehicle to grid capability. We end up in a situation where every single electric car at some point in the next 5 to 10 years turns into a mini battery. So in all these areas, talking about grid balancing and load balancing, if everyone's got their vehicles parked into chargers and there's bi-directional charging capabilities, whether that's your house or whether that's a lamppost, that is a great opportunity to create some real big wins there. So if someone was to ask me where's the technology going in the next 5, 10 years, it's that aspect of vehicles grid. We're already seeing it in the BYDs which are outside. They've got 3-pin plugs in it. That's a very basic aspect of that. But the opportunity to charge your car on solar and then take that to the office and plug that in on a bidirectional charge, and use that to put some energy back into the grid. It's a great opportunity. But the problem is at the moment is the tech is only getting to a point where it's developing where only certain cars can charge it on a bidirectional basis. And then OCPP, which is the charging protocol that is used, it's at 1.6 at the moment. It's going to go 2.0. 2.0 is where you have the bidirectional. So not all chargers are capable of that. All the chargers we put in now are capable of it, but our old historic kit isn't. So there's a lot of moving plates involved in that part of the process to get that to work. And on your point on petrol stations, ironically, I actually used to own a petrol station, so you probably wouldn't think that. This is back in the day. This was about 10 years ago. Petrol station, again, is very high volume, very low margins, but the dwell time there is very, very low, because someone's coming in and in the place that I had back in 2013, you used to put the petrol into the car for them. And I didn't buy it by choice. I bought another company and that came with it. It was a buy one, get one free. But a lot of these places we look at now, if you look at a place in Cardiff, they've got fuel stations, but they've got massive charging hubs next door to that as well. So it is starting to go that way. But I think this whole thing of people saying, we're going to replace petrol stations with EV charging hubs is just not practical, because the dwell time that they have in those places and the level of chargers you need. I was charging recently in Warwick last Thursday, and there's 350 kilowatt chargers, which charged my car in 25, 30 minutes. If I was taking that into the petrol station, it would have been 3-4 minutes. So if you think of where we need to be to get to that level of speed, first of all, it's not good for the batteries. It's definitely not good for the grid, and it's not good for the local area. So it's trying to find the balance of, again, the impact that has on the local area as well.
Thank you. Do you need this back?
Right. Oh, well, actually, you hold on to that, because we've got a very quick fire round. Now, we're over just a couple of minutes, but just because the sound was a bit crazy. Very, very quick then. What's one barrier you would remove tomorrow?
Bureaucracy.
Okay, Richard?
Donald Trump.
You can't top that one, can you?
No.
Carbon accounting, as I said.
Lovely. Okay, you stick hold of the mic then. One myth about net zero you wish would disappear?
I think we can make a difference individually. Take the moral high ground.
That rising energy costs are the fault of net zero.
But it's unattainable.
Brilliant, lovely. And then the very last one, and this is now, you have to listen carefully for this one. What's one thing the audience can do this week to support climate change?
Go and buy an electric car, FleetEV.
Well done.
Get quotes for solar panels on your house. It's surprisingly easy to get it done, but people just don't have that nudge. There isn't a moment comes where they suddenly wake up one day and decide, I'll go and do that.
And sign up to Zero Bank.
Sorry,
Yeah.
yes. Open a free account for Zero Bank.
Yeah. Just be inquisitive about it and ask questions to your friends about it and what they're doing. Just keep it community. Talk about it.
Keep talking.
Said that as well. So I've just got solar panels on my house and loft insulation and cavity wall insulation, which they told me I had it when I bought it, didn't have it. So I actually didn't realise there's a government grant available from Welsh Government called the Green Homes Grant Scheme. So it's not means tested, doesn't matter if you've got any health conditions, you just basically get a fully funded up to a point on certain measures. So there's stuff out there which they never ever advertise unless you actually go digging for it. And I just speculatively applied and then got a call saying, you've been given a grant for £15,000 to have measures added to your property. So just echo what the guy said, be inquisitive, but there's some low-hanging fruit there to take advantage of, and it'll save you some energy, but also make your house a lot more comfortable to live in.
It is annoying, though, that those schemes come and go. There was some actual social media that Cardiff Council put out, which said, we're running this scheme, which will give you a grant towards putting solar panels in your home. And I haven't done it on mine yet, so I immediately went in and went on the website, and it said, sorry, the scheme's currently closed. It's like, Jesus, you're spending money on promoting this on social media, and the scheme's not even open. Join the dots.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Hopefully you found that useful. I know I did. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's have a round of applause. Come on, that was good. Thank you everyone, and thank you Sarah for leading the chair. That's it, that concludes our formal programme for the day. The exhibition remains open until 7 o'clock and drinks will be served at the central bar. Enjoy the rest of the event and the evening. We'll see you again tomorrow for something a bit different. Talent for Tech, Wales's ultimate tech career event, as brought to you by Technology Connected and Partners. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Nos da, thank you very much, and good evening. Take care.